then that data for that person, my data for that person is called secondary data. That means the data, the video is already in use. I have already published the data, and that data is used by a person for that, for his or her context. So that kind of data is called secondary data. So whenever you collect data from any website, from any social media site that already exists, so that kind of data is called secondary data. So whenever we collect data, that may be structured one, that may be unstructured one, that may be semi-structured one. So that data can be primary one, data can be secondary one, right? So are you clear about what is primary data and what is secondary data? If you feel any kind of doubt at any point, you can ask me. Okay. So whenever we want to extract information, we want to know that whether our data is the primary one or the secondary one. So primary data means the data that is not in use, that is not previously used. That is the newly discovered data, the newly used data. At the first time, I am using the data, that is called primary data, right? Suppose the data is X contains some information, and X is not given by any organization. I'm the first person that I'm using the I just got B in the value of in place of someone, just using the content that is stored in X. So value X stored in X, that is primary data. That is primary data. And secondary data means this is I'm the first one that I am just using the value of X. I just explored what can be in the value of X. So this is the primary data. And any data, if that is already used by someone, some organization at any place, the data is already in use, already used, and but we are uh, again using that data, we are again taking the data and implementing that data for our purpose, for our context, that can be considered as the secondary data. That means, suppose regarding a state, the information, or regarding a country, the information already stored in the Wikipedia, the already stored in the website, already stored in the social media. You have not collected data about the country. The data is already there. Someone has collected the data, someone has gathered the data. By that person may might be going to that country or interacted with the persons in the country and collected data or information regarding those countries, everything regarding the country, and those data are stored in the website. You have not collected, someone has collected, and you are just conducting a study, and you just needed that the information or the various information about that particular country. So what do? You just search the internet, find out the website, and you just grabbed the data already stored in the website of that particular country. So that kind of data is called primary data. And someone has gathered the data that is collected by someone else. So that kind of data is called secondary data, right? For example, that I explained now. Suppose you went to a village, you went to a city, and you interacted directly with the persons and you collected few data. So that is called primary data. That is not collected by anyone else. You are the first one that you are collecting data, collecting that kind of data. That is called the primary data. If few data is already collected, that is already displayed in social media, that is already displayed in the database, that is already displayed in the website, and you are just considering those data, you are just taking those data, that is called primary data. That is more important. That kind of data is called secondary data, right? Clear? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So let's consider whenever we are just we are here to study the data science, and the purpose of data science is to analyze the variety of data that we considered to get knowledge. That means we are here to mine the data that we collected from various sources. So data mining is a part of data science. So what is the meaning of data mining? We are mining the data, we are collecting, that means extracting data from various sources. We analyze the pool of data, and we are applying various algorithms to mine the data, and we at the final we are getting knowledge. That means knowledge means the required thing that for which we are conducting analysis on the data. So if we got the data that we require, we can call that is the knowledge, that is the insight. So there is a pool of data where we mine the data to get the information. What is called, this is data mining, which is a portion of data science. So whenever we consider data science, we analyze the data. We can have structured data, we can have unstructured data, we can have semi structured data. That means we have variety of data can we can collect from various sources. Various sources means the sources of collection of data can be internal within the organization, within the institution, or from the market, or from the websites, or from the social media. We can collect the data. So the source of data collection can be internal, can be external. Internal means within a circle, within a particular area, within a particular space, we are collecting the data. So if we are collecting the data within the organization, within the institution, or within the website, so that data is external. External means we are collecting the data outside regarding the institution. So the data can be external. So whenever we collect data, we can get data of any format, of a variety of format. So depending of the variety of format, so that the data is categorized into three types. That is structured one, this is unstructured one, and this is semi structured one. Structured data, unstructured data, and semi structured data. So we will discuss it one by one. So this is called types of data. So the question may come, differentiate between structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data, right? So come to the first one, that is structured data. What is the meaning of this? Structured data, that means the data should be in a particular structure. Particular structure means generally the data is stored in a tabular format. Tabular format means in the form of row and data. The data, if it is structured, it should be properly defined. It should be defined in a proper data model. Data model means we just have data, relational data model means various types of data model generally used in case of data analysis. Any idea? Okay, no issue. See, how can you define structured data? Structured data means data in a tabular format, data in a particular structure. Here, particular structure means the data should be in tabular format with row and column. The data should be clearly defined. That means if we are having looking into the data and we can clearly understand the what the data wants to say, so we consider that as the structured data. So if we cannot understand what the data wants to say us, that is the unstructured one, right? So let this is the table. Yeah. This is the table, and in table data is stored in the form of row and column. Let So this is row and these are the columns. So here I am storing let ID of a student. ID of student, this is name, this is address, right? So we are storing information of a student, that it has student ID, student name and student address. So here the data of a first student is stored. The student ID let it is one, student name let it is X, and address let it is India. Okay, so I am storing information about second student. Let it has some ID, it has some name, it has some address. So here data is stored in a tabular format, in the tabular structure, and the data is clearly defined. That means we can uh, uh, define the data. That means it is the ID part, we have to store the data. This is the name part, we have to store the name. This is the address part, we have to store the address. So these are the information that is clearly visible, clearly understood by the person who will see this table. That means here the row and columns are interrelated with each other. Here what happens, in first row we are storing the information of a first student, in the second row we will store information of the second student, and in the third row we will store information of the third student. So this is the structured data. And if we will look into the table, we can have a proper view, we can understand the data properly. So this kind of data is called structured data, right? This is the structured data. So for example, if there is a airline service is there, and in the airline service, the name of the flight, the departure of the flight, and the means let the tickets, that is the business class ticket, the first class tickets, the economy class tickets, everything, every information is stored in a tabular format. Everything is properly visible, properly understood. So we can say that is the structured data. Structured data. Structured data is nothing but defined. We cannot have a proper view, we cannot have a proper understanding that what data says. So that kind of data is called unstructured data. That means in our day to day life we use 80 to 90% of data as unstructured. That means if we are using the social media data, that means the Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, Google, every data is unstructured. We can have image data, we can have audio, video data. So that is not a proper, any proper structure is not there. Those data are not stored in a tabular format. We cannot just say that what the data wants to say to us. So all these data are called unstructured. For example, you might have seen the survey forms. The survey forms are the unstructured data. Why? So, as you might see, that in survey form there are some cases where we need to check or tick the checkbox. In some cases, we have to answer some open-ended questions. So, for example, let's fill a survey of coffee. That means if there are few questions like this, what is your favorite kind of coffee? So, few check boxes are there. You want to check. You have to tick. Second question: how many cups of coffee do you have in a day? So again, check boxes you have to tick. Then again, third question is how does coffee make you feel? So in this case, you have to explain. So whatever the survey, this survey has a variety of data. There is no proper structure that you have to all tick mark or you have to all describe in open ended. But here is the mixture of both. You have to make checkbox, you have to tick the check boxes, and you have to answer the open ended questions. So this is not a proper format. So we can say the survey form is the unstructured data, right? Then come to semi-structure. Semi-structure means the data that is not purely structured or the data that is not purely unstructured is called semi-structured data. The data that falls between structured and unstructured data is called semi-structured one, right? So in this case, if we will say the email, we will say the www, World Wide Web, we'll say the XML data. Those are semi-structured, right? You might have seen in case of email, there is the 2%. 2% means the receiver one, that is constant. Subject one, that is constant. But in case of content, we can include the videos, we can make the attachment of images, we can make attachment of audio, we can also write something, we can attach the word file, we can attach the PDF file. Means that is the email, that the data we are considering that contains both structured one, both unstructured one. So this is the example of semi structured data. So this is all about the structured, unstructured and semi structured data. So till now, regarding the types of data, any doubt? Okay. Okay, let's see. Here what happens? See the process. We have a problem, we want to find some solution, we want to analyze the data because we have a problem. So first of all, problem is defined. Then in order to solve the problem, data is collected. After collecting the data is analyzed. Then the model is prepared depending on the data what we want to analyze. After that, this model is verified, and or the new data is verified against the model, but whether the model is properly actually working or not, that is called verification portion. And after verification, we get the insight, we get the knowledge that actually this is the problem, this was the problem. And after analysis of the data, we consider the insight, or we consider the knowledge. So this is the cycle, you can say the cycle of data science, where we perform data mining process, that we mine the data, we extract knowledge from the data that is available, right? So this is the problem defined. We collected data from various sources, we analyze the data using various methods. Then we generate the insight from the model. And the model that we have developed, again verified against the data. After verification, whether the model is correct, then we conclude from that. So after verification, we generate the insight, we generate the knowledge, right? So this is the entire data science process, where we just consider the data mining procedure, right? See, so this is the data science definition that I already explained, that what is the meaning of data science. So in brief, data science is the study of data, where we collect different data from different sources, we extract, then we analyze the data to find the information, we find the relevant information or the insight that we generally need. So in data science, there is the use of big data. So what is big data here? Big data means the data that is big. Big in the sense there should be huge volume of data, and there should be various various format of data. So variety means various format of data. Volume is huge volume, large data set should be there, and velocity means the data is accessed from the various data sources, that should be higher. So in big data, then generally we have three V. Three V. V stands for one V is volume, second is velocity, third is variety. But we have already we can also include one another V, that is called veracity. So in big data, so in overall we can say that there are four V of volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. And all kind of data, after analyzing all the data, we can have the structured, we can have the unstructured, we can have the semi structured, or we can have any of these data combined, which is called one. So if we say about big data, you see that big data is larger, it is the complex data set. You can have the new data, that means you can have the primary data or the secondary data. So there should be huge volume of data, there should be the maximum velocity, there should be variety of data, and there should be the veracity of data. So we will discuss one by one, right? So first B of big data is what? So big data means huge volume of data, huge variety of data we are collecting, upon which the data science is applied to derive the knowledge, right? So here volume. Volume means huge volume. So whenever we collect data, the data should be of huge amount. For example, we can consider the data can be from IoT devices, the data can be from social media, the data can be from wearables, or the data can be from human product. So any source of data we can collect from various of sources that have huge volume of data. So this is called volume. Then next is called velocity. Velocity means the rate at which data is and it is processed, that is called velocity. For example, if we consider the self driving car, suppose from the sensors we collected data, and the sensor that just sensed that someone is crossing the road. So the self driving car stopped, and whenever the sensor sensed that the person has already crossed the road, then the self driving car will start again, will go. That means the rate at which the data is sensed that the person is crossing the road, the self driving car should stop. So that is the velocity. So everything, the data that is collected from the source should be the faster one, so that we can have quick decision, right? Next is called variety. Variety means various types. That means whenever we collect data, we collect data from various sources. That is called the variety of data. We can have structured data, unstructured type of data. We can collect data from internal, external, or various sources of data. Again, that is called variety. Next must be the quality one. Quality means there should not be any missing data. Whatever the data we collect, that should be as per our need. That means we should collect those data that we need. Data shouldn't be the duplication one. That means there shouldn't be any redundant data. That means if there will be redundancy in the data, so we cannot say that is the proper data, because we can have their updation anomaly. Whenever we update data, so there may be some data that is updated, that may be incorrect, and that is the reason whenever we extract data, so the data that we consider should be of good quality, right? So that is called quality. There are four qualities of big data, right? So till this, any doubt, students?
No, ma, there is no any doubt.
Okay. So you may get questions the differences in between structured, unstructured, semi-structured data. So just make sure that you are writing the question that I am saying. What is the difference between primary and secondary data? This is the first question you should write. If you have copy and pen with you, then you can write that what is the difference between primary and secondary data. This is the first question. What is the difference between primary and secondary data? Second question will be differentiate or explain structured data, unstructured data, and semi structured data. So, whenever you will explain all these three, you can easily find out the difference. So, whether the question may be the differentiation of these three or explanation of these three. So, always try to explain the concept with few examples so that you will be clear, and who will just copy your check your copies, that person will be sure that this the student, the candidate knows, right? So always try to explain your concept with few examples, and try to consider the real time example so that everyone will be clear. Okay. See, now how big data works. We told what is big data. Big data means the data that is complex in structure, that is collected from various sources, huge in volume, huge in quick in the velocity, and it has good quality. That is the big data. So when we consider about the big data, how it works generally, when we say it is a big data, it should be integrated, it should be managed. Second one is managed, and the third one will be it should be analyzed, right? So what is the meaning of this? So first of all, we will explain one by one. What is the meaning of integration? The big data, how it is work? It first integrates the data. Integrates means it collects data from various of sources, from various of applications. So we can say, so there is ETL tool. ETL means extract, transform, and load, right? ETL means extract, transform, and load. That means we have to extract data from various sources. Then when we extract data, we know as the data we are gathering from these various sources, so these data are of various format. So we have to transform the data into a particular format so that we can apply algorithm upon that to extract the knowledge, right? So we have to transform that. Then we have to load the data. Load the data means after transforming, after converting the data into a particular format, we have to load the data into the database so that we can perform our analysis to make the decision, right? So this is called ETL. So here we integrate data from various sources, we collect data from various sources, then we transform the data, then we load the data into the database, right? So this is the meaning of integration. After integrating, we manage the data. So what is the meaning of managing the data? We want to store the data. So for storing data, we can use cloud, or we can use any form of data storage, but generally we prefer cloud for data storage. Why? Because in cloud we can, it can support variety of technology, and we can use the data stored in cloud at any time, at any place, right? So that's why we just prefer cloud for our data storage. So after managing the data, we analyze the data. Why? When we analyze the data, we want to get something that is required by us. So We collect data, we manage data, then we analyze the data to make to extract new discoveries, to make to find the new data, new knowledge that actually needed by us. So this is how the big data works. So if you get any doubt, please ask me. Okay. Okay. See, the tool I was just saying, that is ETL. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load, that I explained. See, when we extract data from various sources, we extracted, when we are extracting the data, we are storing the data in a pool or in a staging area. So that staging area is called data lake. So data lake is what? It is a type of storage. It is a type of temporary storage where we store data after collecting from various sources. So whenever we collect data and stored in the staging area like data lake, so it contains raw data. It can contain the missing value, it can contain the null value, it can contain the duplicate value, which is not useful if we want something from the data, we want something relevant from the data. So what we'll do, we just purify, we just pre-process the data stored in the data lake. So for that, what we'll do, we will transform the data. That means we will convert the data into a certain format so that we can apply the algorithm, we can apply the various procedures to extract the data easily. Okay. So after transforming, we load the data in a database which is called as data warehouse, right? So what is this data warehouse? As you know, what is the meaning of warehouse? Warehouse means a building where things are kept before processed, right? So data warehouse means it is a larger repository or database where we put data after transforming from the data lake. So whatever the data stored in the data warehouse are, they are in structured, unstructured, and semi-structured form, but that data repository does not contain any missing value, any redundancy value that will harm our findings, right? So this is called data warehouse. So we have to extract, we have to transform, we have to load data in the data warehouse, right? So whenever we store data in the data warehouse, from the data warehouse, we have we have to consider the data. This is the user is taking data from the data warehouse and implementing for its own purpose, right? See, you can see the diagram here. Data lake is contains the raw data. There can be missing data, there can be unordered data, that means the data is not segregated, not in a proper format. There can be the redundant data. So this is called data lake. So if we consider data warehouse, everything is well structured, well maintained, and that does not contain missing value, that doesn't contain duplicate value. So we contain the data in the data, that means the data warehouse store the data that we actually need. So data warehouse is more structured, you can see from the diagram also, and data lake is not structured, it contains only raw data, right? So this is the difference between data warehouse and data lake. Both are a repository, both are the data base where we can store data. This is the temporary data, this is the temporary database, and this is also temporary database. But the data stored in the data warehouse is more structured than the data in the data lake. In data lake, it contains value, it contains a null value, it contains inappropriate value, or it contains the duplicate value. But in data warehouse, every data is well structured, it doesn't have any inappropriate value. Every data that is required by us for the data analysis purpose is stored in the data warehouse. So this is the basic difference between data lake and a data warehouse, right? So here another diagram of ETL tool. So this is the extraction one. We are extracting data from sources. This is source one, source two, source three. So after extracting, we are putting that in the staging area. So staging area is the temporary storage, that is the data lake here. Then after transforming and transforming, we are loading the data in data warehouse. So data warehouse contains structured data, unstructured data, and the semi-structured data. So from the data warehouse, we are considering data for applying reporting tools to prepare the report. We analyze the data in the data warehouse, data stored in the data warehouse, or we mine the data that is stored in the data warehouse to extract some information that help us to make decisions. So these are the works that is performed at the user side using various tools. The user can uh, use the data stored in the data warehouse. So this is all about the data warehouse, data lake, and ETL process that is generally used in data science. So till this, anything that creates problem for you?
Yes, it's
Okay.
understandable now.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. See, another thing is that what are the challenges that is faced by a data scientist? So data scientist is the person who make use of data science process, who work with the data to develop some capability for taking further decisions, right? So these data scientists, what are the challenges should be that can be faced by the data scientists? First of all, as we know that in data science we make use of variety of data sources. So if we have variety of data sources, then variety of data format we have, and all the data if of different format, we cannot use all the formats to get the information that we need. So we have to convert that, we have to transform the data to a particular format, right? So that we can apply the algorithms as per our need to extract the information. So whenever we consider data from multiple sources, we have to clean the data. So cleaning up data means removing the noisy data. So what is noisy data? The data that is not appropriate, the data that is missing, the data if that contains some null value, or the data if that contains some duplicate value. So these are called noisy data. So whenever we collect data, whenever we analyze the data, we must be sure that our data does not contain any noisy data. So we have to clean the data. We have to prepare our data. The data should be the consistent one. That means the correct data we should consider for analysis purpose. Otherwise, it take much more time, and it will be very difficult to analyze the data. So if we have multiple data sources, then these are the problems that can be created, and the data scientist should clean the data and prepare the data so in such a way that analyzing the data becomes easier. and it is quick analysis of the data. Second one is understanding the business problem. It is what? See, whenever we collect data, we collect data from multiple stakeholders, we collect data from multiple, means variety, various business managers. So as we are collecting data from various personnels, so the requirements are variety. Because if I have some requirements, if data is collected from any other person, that person has different requirements. So as we are considering data from various sources, those all have different requirements. So the data scientist should consider the variety of requirements and should work upon the data collected to fulfill the requirements. Right. Third one is the elimination of bias. What is this bias? Bias means anything that affect our finding, that affect our requirements or the result that I want from the data. Means what? Suppose uh, if you are collecting data from a particular source, if the data collection is not proper, then whenever you analyze the data, you cannot get the proper result or the required result that is intended to. So make sure that whenever you are collecting the sample, we are collecting the data, particular data, or you are applying procedures on the data, that data should be the quality one, the data should be the clean one, the data should be the appropriate one. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to get the meaningful insight. Right? For example, suppose you have designed a model that contains the means the requirements of middle aged individuals. Suppose you collected, again you collected data that contains the requirements of teenagers, that contains the requirements of the old aged persons. So then whenever you correlate your data collection with the model generated, the you cannot get the proper result. Why? Because you have generated the model, you have just defined a model that contains only the middle aged individual's requirement, and you want to map with the middle aged individual's requirement with the teenagers and with the old old men individuals. So how can you get the proper result? You cannot get. So the data scientist should eliminate this bias using the various machine learning techniques, using deep learning techniques, so that whenever we just compare new data with the model that we have generated, we can have the proper data or proper result from the model that we are comparing. So these are the challenges that is faced by the data scientist. So I think this is clear. Let's have a look at the points that is written here. Multiple data sources, understanding business purpose, and elimination of bias. Okay, clear. See, these are a few procedures that is being carried out during data science analysis. That means in case of data science analysis, that means when we analyze the data from various sources, we store that in data lake, we store in data warehouse. So data should be pre-processed. So data pre-processing means it is a process that is applied on the data stored in the data lake. You can see from the example from the diagram here. See, here data lake is there. Before storing data in the data lake, we have extracted from various data sources. So we have already collected data. We are putting that in the data lake. And I told that data lake is a process that contains data of means it can contain data of not noisy data or missing data or inadequate data it contains. So we do not need that kind of data for our analysis purpose. So we have to clean the data, we have to pre-process the data. So before storing data in the data warehouse, before after the data from the data lake will be stored in the data warehouse. So before storing the data, the data should be pre-processed. That means the data in the data lake should be pre-processed so that we can easily store in the data warehouse and we can have insights, or we can have the required knowledge from the data, right? So first of all, this is pre-processing. Here, what is the meaning of pre-processing here? Data pre-processing means the process that is used for cleaning the data. We have to clean the data, we have to transform the data, we have to integrate the data, and we have to reduce the data, and so that we can have those data to get the proper insight, right? So first of all, the first data pre-processing technique is called data cleaning. So cleaning up data means removing the noisy data. That means the we have to identify the noisy data. That means the data that is not adequate, that is not required by us. The value that contains the inconsistent data, duplicacy data, missing data. So all the data that will affect badly to our outcome. So we have to clean those data. Then after clean, we have to integrate that into a particular data set, so that we can say that this data set does not contain any inappropriate data, right? So after getting that, we have to transform the data. So data transformation means we have to convert the data into a particular format so that we can apply various data analysis algorithms, data mining algorithms, so that we can have proper outcome that we actually need. So this is the data transformation, right? So after that, we can reduce the data. So data reduction means we are reducing the size of the data set, but we are not affecting, or we are preserving the important information. That means the information that is stored in the data, that is preserved, but we are reducing the size of the data set. So that is called data reduction. So this is explained properly, explained more clearly, that what is data reduction. So I told you the meaning of data reduction. That means we are preserving the important information, but we are reducing the size of a database. So how can it be done? So it can be done using feature selection. Feature selection means that, suppose in a tabular format we are storing data, right? That I told you that data is stored in the relational form. The relation means table. So table means data is stored in the form of row and column. Suppose this first feature is student ID, second feature is student name, third feature is student address. Feature selection means we are selecting the appropriate important features. We without considering the every features, right? So if we need student ID and student name, we can easily get the information of the student. We can also easily get other information of a student. So we are just selecting these two features, student ID and student name. We are not considering student address. So these are the important features we are selecting. That means here in this case, we reduced the size of the data, but we preserved the important information. Because if you need the raw ID of the student, if you get the name of the student, you can easily get other information, right? So this is called feature selection. You are selecting important feature, you are just taking a subset of the entire features which is most relevant, while preserving the important information, right? This is called feature selection. Next is called feature extraction. This is one of the process through which we can reduce the data set. So what is feature extraction? Feature extraction means we are considering a single or a multiple of features, and using that feature we can extract any other features. That is called feature extraction, right? So if in a relation, if in a table, the student information is stored, student ID, student name, student address, student phone number, student email, etc. Everything is stored. And I told that just you know the student ID. So if you know the student ID, you can collect information regarding a student that is stored in the database. So do not need student name, do not need address, you do not need phone number, you do not know, need email ID, etc. But if you know the student ID from the database, you can directly find out all the information, because student ID is the unique one. Every student has separate and unique student ID. So getting the student ID, you can know all the features. So this is called feature extraction. So using a single or using a multiple of features, you can extract any other features. Then coming to sampling. Sampling is one of the process through which you reduce the data set. So what is sampling here? So if we have a larger data set, this is the larger data set, we have huge amount of data. And sampling is the process through which we divide or we extract a data set, subset of the data from the data set. So this is called sampling. The process of deriving or the process of finding sample from the entire data set is called sampling. So this is the entire data set consists of huge amount of data. We just collected few data that is most relevant for our study, for our analysis. So this few data set is considered as a sample. So this process of extracting sample from the entire data set is called sampling. So if we are considering only the important features for study purpose, we just reduce the size of data set. So for this, sampling is one of the procedure, one of the process, one of the technique through which we can reduce the data size. Next is called clustering. See, clustering means the process of making clusters. So what is the meaning of cluster? Cluster means group. This is called group. This is also called group. So group means this is a group that contains the data elements of similar feature. You might have seen that friendship group, friends groups is, that means the students or the candidates in a particular friends group, they have similar mentality, they have similar behavior, so that's why they are forming a group. So whenever we form group, we form clusters, always the data present in the cluster have similar data, features have similar properties. So whenever we form clusters, we form small groups, and we just put the similar data sets into this variety of clusters. These clusters act as individual data sets. So instead of considering the entire data set, we reduce the size. We just divided the data of similar features into clusters. So in this way, we can reduce the size, right? Next is called compression. So data compression means we are compressing the data set, reducing the size of the data set, but we preserve the important information. For example, JPG compression, PDF compression. So information that we need, that is already present in the PDF, that is already present in the JPG, but we are just reducing the size. So that is called compression, right? Then is called data discretization. See, what is the meaning of data discretization here? We have a large data. We are dividing the data into intervals. So these intervals contain few data. This interval contain few data. So whenever we divide the entire data into data intervals, so these data interval contains few data, and though these interval acts as an individual data unit. So we do not consider the entire data set. We consider only the data interval for the analysis purpose. So we focus on the data interval only instead of focusing the entire data set. So this is called data discretization, right? Next, tool is next technique is data normalization. This is nothing but the data transformation. So data transformation or data normalization means we are dividing the larger data into the smaller data set and make sure that there is not a duplicate data in the database. Every unit or every interval is properly considered, properly formed, so that it contains the data, contains the particular format, or all the data in a particular interval should be in a particular format, so that we can apply the analysis process easily, and we can get the data. So we normalize the data. We divide the data in such a way that the interval or the parts or the division or the data fragments, so that we can apply various algorithms to normalize the data and to get our outputs done. So this is data normalization. So these are techniques that we do consider for data reduction purpose. And what is data reduction? Data reduction is one of the data pre-processing tool. Okay. So let me know in case is there any doubt about data pre-processing. Let's have a look at the slide. See that I told we can collect data from various sources of structured, unstructured, and semi structured data. And whenever I was explaining about structured data, I told that data is stored in a relation in a proper format and data is clearly defined. So, this is called a relation. Relation means it is nothing but a table that is where the data is stored in the form of row and column. So, this is a table of employee, and this contains employee id, employee name, and employee salary, right? So here employee is what? Employee is an entity. I hope you have heard this. Entity. Entity means what? Any idea, students, what is entity? Here employee is an entity. Any idea what entity? Yes. See, entity is what? Anything. If anybody asks you what it is, just explain entity. You can say entity is anything that may be living one, that may be not living one, but that should have some property is called entity, right? If I'm considering, I'm just taking example of myself. I have a name, I have email, I have passport, I have Aadhaar, I have phone number. That means these are my properties. I consider myself as an entity. If I will take the example of this room, this chamber. This chamber has a name. This chamber belongs to a particular department. This chamber has height and width. So these are the properties of this chamber that I am sitting here. So this chamber is the non-living one. Still, it has property. So this is an entity. I am living one. I have property. So I am entity. So anything that can be living one, can be non-living one, having some properties called entity. So you are surrounded by the entities in each and every time. From morning to night, you are surrounded with the entities, right? So here, employee is an entity. Why? Each employee has some properties. Each employee has ID, each employee has a name, each employee draws some salary. So these are the properties, right? So whenever we just design a relation or table, relation means table. So we just put the attributes of this entity in a column. That means this is a column. So we put here employee ID. So employee ID is what? This is the attribute of employee. Employee name is what? This is the attribute of employee. Salary is what? This is the attribute of employee. So these are the attributes of this employee. And what is this? This is the value that we are just filling for the these attributes, right? This is the first employee whose ID is 123. Employee name is Jack, and the person is drawing the salary of 30,000. So like this, we have just filled the rows. So this is first row, second row, third row, and fourth row, right? So in a relation, there are column. This is column, this is another column, this is another column. So this relation has three columns and four rows. So in each row, we are filling the information of a particular employee. So this is employee 1 having ID 123, employee 2 having ID 142, employee 3 having ID 164. And here is another employee which the employee has no employee ID. This is one example. Just so this is a relation. So whenever we store data in the form of a relation, the data, the row and column are relevant to each other. This related to each other. That means employee ID. We are just putting values against the employee ID. We are just putting values against the employee name. We are putting values against the salary. That means rows and columns are related with each other, and the data we are putting are relevant data, clearly defined. This 30,000 is what? 30,000 is the salary. What is this Jack? Jack is the name of employee. What is this 123? This is the ID of the employee. So everything is properly defined. So that's why we are calling this as the structured data. So in case of structured data, how can you say the data that is stored in the database is properly defined, is well defined? We can say that by applying some constraints in the data set. So what is constraint? Constraint is the rule, is the guidelines that is applied on the data, so that whenever we put data, whenever we store data in the database, that should be of quality data. There shouldn't be any inappropriate data that is not required in the database. So in order to ensure that, we use constraints. So how many types of constraints are there? First of all, it is domain constraint. So what is the meaning of domain? Domain means the value we are applying against an attribute. So salary is the attribute property of the employee, and we are putting the value 60,000 against salary. So what is this 60,000? This is the value that is inserted against the salary. So this value is called domain. So we should ensure that these values to be filled while considering the domain, which is called domain constraint. So domain constraint means here you can see ID. This is one attribute and its data type is integer. That means we should enter value. Name is the attribute, its data type is varchar. That means we can enter the variable character, we can use the string. Semester, this is attribute, and its data type is, you can say it is the integer one. And age is the attributes, its data type is integer. So here we just inserted all the integer value, but here we inserted the character value, which is not permitted by the domain constraint, because domain constraint says that age the attribute age should have integer type. We inserted here, everything is okay, but here in this case it is just violating the domain constraint. So if we are inserted constraints or guidelines in the domain, so we can have proper data. So whenever we'll try to insert a in the field of age, it will just show us an alert that you are inserting the wrong value. So in this case we can rectify our mistake, right? So another is entity integrity constant. Entity integrity means the primary key in the data set. The primary key in the data set should be the should not be null. Means what? Here, in case of employee, employee ID is the primary key, right? Primary key is what? It is an attribute or combination of attributes that is used to identify a single entity uniquely from other entity. Because anything, any property about me will identify myself from other girls, so that is called my primary key. So if I'm working in an organization, I have an employee ID which is uniquely given to me, and this employee ID will uniquely identify me from the hundreds of employees in my organization. So for me, employee ID is the primary key. So entity integrity constant says, so if you are just making a relation, your primary key shouldn't be null. So if by mistake we have not inserted value in the primary key, so it will just alert us that it should be filled up, right? So this is called entity integrity constant. And the last one is called key constant. Key constant means, key means what? Key means attribute, right? Key means attribute. So that can be single attribute or multiple attributes. So ID can be a key that is used to identify a particular person from another person, or we can combine ID with name that can uniquely identify a person from another person, or we can combine ID with age also, that it can be used to uniquely identify an entity. So key can be a single attribute or combination of attributes that is used to uniquely identify an entity from another. So in case of key constant, what happens that the primary key shouldn't be duplicated one. The primary key should be unique. So I told you the primary key is what? Any attribute, single attribute that is used to uniquely identify one entity from another. So for a student roll number is the primary key in the institution. For an employee ID is the primary key in the institution. That is used to uniquely identify an employee, an student, or student from another student or another employee. So these are the ID. So this ID in this relation is called primary key, right? So primary key shouldn't be null. This is called key constant, right? So if you are putting key constant, you should make sure that primary key shouldn't be duplicated one, not null. This is shouldn't be duplicated one. So the primary key should be unique one. There should be a unique primary key. So while constructing a relation, if we are inserting duplicate value at the place of primary key, it will just stop us from analyzing the data, and it will say that you have inserted wrong data in case of primary key, as you are following the key constant. So key constant says the key or the primary key should be unique one. So using these of the filters, using these of the guidelines, it will help us to make the data more structured. And if we are getting structured data, it will give us better benefit or better experience to analyze the data to get the proper insight from the data, right? So these are the things that I need to explain about data science and the unit of data science and big data, right? So okay. So students, up to this, any doubt regarding any topic, any uh, this heading that I explained? See, you study what is data science, what is big data, the three V's of big data, what are the different types of data, starting from primary, secondary data, and the data means how big data works, what is the process of data science, and what is data pre-processing, data lake, and data warehouse, everything, and how can we put constraint to ensure the structured data in the database. So these are the features that I explained today. So regarding this, any doubt or everything is clear?
Clear, ma.
Yes, it is clear.
Okay. Okay. So to just make few notes that tomorrow just make me sure that you are very much clear about what is data science and what is big data. Okay, if I ask someone tomorrow that tell me what is this, so you should explain me that what is data science, what is big data, what are the four V's of big data, and how big data works, and what is there means the data ETL tool. What is ETL? This very important one, ETL tool. And what are the data pre-processing techniques, pre-processing processes that we just carry out, and what are the structured, unstructured, semi-structured data along with the examples, right? And how can you put constraint on the data to ensure that we are in a consistent data management system? Clear? So I think you all are clear, and you should explain me to clearly tomorrow. Okay.
But great.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this class. So we'll continue tomorrow, the next one.
वो मैं सही है, I will say, hey,
Thank you very much.
say
Thanks.
something.